So good evening, everyone. And I think everyone has been served dessert. So that means it is showtime. So when I became chancellor 10 years ago, actually more than 10 years ago now, this was one of the first events that Carol and I attended. And if those of you that have been around a while will remember, it was held at the West Alumni Center. And I sat there, and I couldn't see because there was a big post in front of me. And I thought, we need to move this event. This is an event that honors the heroes of teaching at UCLA. And we thought there's got to be a better venue. So for the last several years, we've actually held it here. And I think we're very proud to hold the event here at the residence. So I want to thank the Office of Instructional Development and the Academic Senate Committee on Teaching for sponsoring this celebration. They partner in this very important event. It's an event named after a former professor and executive vice chancellor, Andrea, who many of you know, a visionary leader who fought to make excellence in teaching a top priority at this institution. In her nearly 30 years of service, Andrea rose from being an assistant professor to becoming UCLA's chief academic officer. Andrea was an accomplished scholar of intercultural and interracial communications, and she was a champion for undergraduate education. And among her many accomplishments was the creation of the OID. She oversaw restructuring of UCLA's arts programs to bring greater professional focus to arts education, and she created tonight's event in 1983. So this is really a long-standing celebration to ensure that we continue to honor UCLA's champions of education. From tenured faculty to lecturers to teaching assistants, your dedication and spirit of innovation have impacted thousands of students. You know, UCLA is truly wholesale. When you walk around today and you see the number of students we're now educating, it is truly extraordinary. And the fact that those students get a chance to really get an excellent education from the very best faculty members, graduate students, teaching assistants, and lecturers is really a very, very strong statement for how much we care about the education of our students. One of our honorees tonight, sociology professor Abigail Sagui, developed a popular new freshman course on gender, one of the first of its kind in the country. Others, like Matthew Fontana, a teaching assistant in the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry, created video tutorials to teach students proper laboratory safety guidelines, a top priority for all labs at UCLA. And Mary Corey, a lecturer in history for more than 20 years, has inspired several of her students to themselves become history teachers at the high school and college level. There are so many other great honorees tonight. Of course, my admiration, we recognize and honor all that you do to support the classroom. To that end, you know, we have an obligation to support you. We are strengthening our TA training programs so that teaching assistants are well prepared to promote students' learning. We're experimenting with new designs for learning spaces to support advances in pedagogy, and already areas adjacent to Powell and Young libraries and on the Hill have been restructured to promote collaborative learning. We really have to restructure an awful lot of our learning spaces, and that is underway. We are investing in the modernization of our classrooms, replacing broken seats, providing better lighting and sound, and installing other technology. I don't know, I think the room that I teach in geology still needs some work, but to be honest, but I think others are improving. Yeah, we're on it. And we've increased ongoing support for teaching by $50 million annually. So Scott Waugh and his office has worked hard to put additional dollars into teaching to make sure we can meet the need of our ever-increasing number of undergraduates. And this has ensured that we'll have an adequate number of faculty and teaching assistants to support students' demand for classes. So as a result, graduation rates have increased and the average time to degree has fallen. And actually, it's quite remarkable. The number of complete quarters to degree completion is now less than 4 years. Now, that student may take a summer courses, but that is really amazing, really, for a public institution. So on behalf of the UCLA community, I congratulate all this year's honorees. Thank you for your commitment, your creativity, and your exemplary service. You know, good teaching is hard. We all know that, and we appreciate it. And now it's my pleasure to turn the podium over to our MC for the evening. She's well known to all of us, faculty director for the Office of Instructional Development and a professor of mechanical and aerospace engineering. Please welcome Adrienne Levine.
Thank you, Jean, and good evening, everyone. As Jean said, I'm the faculty director of the Office of Instructional Development just since this July 1st, and OID is the organization on campus whose role is to support teaching excellence. And in that role, it's my great pleasure to welcome you to the 34th Andrea L. Rich Night to Honor Teaching. As you know, the responsibilities of a faculty member encompass research, teaching, and service. Sometimes these are described as the three legs of a stool. And this night reminds us of the importance of the teaching leg. Without it, the stool would certainly tip over. Without our students and our relationship to them as teachers, the university would literally cease to exist. This night not only reminds us of the importance of teaching, but also illuminates for us the joy of teaching through the words of the instructors and teaching assistants whose interviews you will hear shortly. I imagine that all of us in the room who have taught have experienced that joy. When a student struggles to learn and succeeds, and you feel you had a hand in making that happen, it's intoxicating, even better than the wine that we're drinking tonight. I started coming to this event around 20 years ago, and I remember how moved I was by the sincerity of the teachers, the passion they expressed for inspiring their students and guiding their learning. For me, it was truly a significant part of coming to love UCLA, not just respect it. And surely the powerfulness of this event is a great legacy for the late Andrea Rich. I want to thank Chancellor and Mrs. Block for elevating the status of the event by moving it here to the Chancellor's residence. It's a very special location. Jean and Carol, thank you for your hospitality and generosity. We're very fortunate that our campus leadership strongly values and promotes excellent teaching. I'd like to acknowledge a number of campus leaders who are with us tonight to join in celebrating our awardees. I apologize in advance for missing anyone and thank these leaders for their support of distinguished teaching. In addition to Chancellor Jean Block and Mrs. Block, these include Scott Waugh, Executive Vice Chancellor and Provost, Clarence Braddock, Vice Dean of Medicine, Miguel Garcia Garibay, Dean of Physical Sciences, Robin Garrell, Vice Provost and Dean of Graduate Division, Darnell Hunt, Dean of Social Sciences, Michael Levine, Interim Vice Chancellor for Academic Personnel, Halma Bouquet, Associate Dean of Engineering and Applied Science, Jan Reif, Special Assistant to the EVC for Online Education, David Skalberg, Dean of Humanities, Joanna Schwartz, Vice Dean of Law, Pat Turner, Vice Provost and Dean of Undergraduate Education and Senior Dean of the College. That's the longest title on the list. Many of the department chairs of the winners are also with us, and I wish to acknowledge their support of teaching excellence and their department's effort in nominating the awardees. We also have leaders of the Academic Senate with us tonight, Sandra Graham, Chair of the Senate, Susan Cochran, Immediate Past Chair, Joseph Bristow, Vice Chair, Jessica Catalino, Outgoing Chair of the Graduate Council, and Albert Corey, Outgoing Chair of the Committee on Teaching. We also welcome the members of the Instructional Improvement Program Committee and Professor Kathleen Komar, their fearless leader. And special thanks to all the members of the Academic Senate Committee on Teaching who had the very difficult job of selecting the final winners from among the many superb dossiers of the nominees. The Committee on Teaching co-sponsors this event with the Office of Instructional Development. And we'd also like to thank the staff of OID, led by Michelle Chen, and particularly Greg Barnes and Sean Cruiser, who are responsible for the videos you'll see very shortly. There are many people who contributed. I can't thank them all individually by name, such as the staff of the Academic Senate, the staff of the Chancellor's residence, the faculty and staff and departments who nominated the individuals and prepared their dossiers, and I express my appreciation to all of them. Now, the central focus of this evening is the winners of the Distinguished Teaching Awards, as well as their families and guests. And we will shortly have the opportunity to hear from them and to present them with certificates, medals, and monetary tokens of our appreciation and admiration. Those distinguished teaching assistant awardees who are advanced to candidacy will also receive a dissertation year fellowship in the amount of $20,000 plus tuition and fees provided by the Graduate Division. Thank you. Yes, thank you, Robin, to help them move forward to the next stage in their careers. To all of our winners, we salute you and your dedication to teaching. In the words of one of my OID colleagues, it's these high flyers that push us to stretch and drive us to communicate their innovations. So to honor their hard work, and of course also for the students of UCLA, we aim to do even more to support faculty teaching excellence and to use these award winners as examples to inspire all faculty and TAs to be great teachers. Now, to present the first awards for the Distinguished Teaching Assistants, here is the Chair of the Graduate Council, Professor Jessica Catalino from the Department of Anthropology. Jessica.
Thank you, Adrian, and I want to underline the thanks to Robin for support for these teaching assistants in the form of a fellowship. When I first started teaching here and saw the wonderful awardees for Teaching Assistant Awards, I thought of this as a kind of professional development, feather in the cap, something that went on the CV, a wonderful opportunity for graduate students. But only over time have I come to realize what a crucial core role teaching assistants play in the teaching of this campus. As our undergraduate enrollment increases, our ladder faculty shrinks, our TAs increasingly do the work of the things we all talk about and think about in our teaching. And so I'm especially proud of the winners tonight. I want to honor them. And I think we as a campus are faced with the dilemma of how to simultaneously recognize the significance of teaching, and on the other hand, maintain a firewall between the labor needs of our teaching staff and the degree requirements and graduate training of our graduate students that we wish to support them in. So how to do that, better minds than I will continue to think about, but tonight, let's honor them. So our first awardee is Erin Crawford. Erin is a teaching assistant in the Department of Sociology who demonstrates a special ability to bring together undergraduates from a wide range of backgrounds in order to critically analyze race relations in the United States. Beyond that, he also challenges students intellectually, builds their classroom confidence, and helps them to feel empowered and valued in the classroom.
One of the things I do, just to keep it lighthearted, I tell students, depending on whatever day my class is on, so, you know, if it was today or something, I would say, you would give a response, and it might be incorrect, or you don't know at this point, and I say, well, you can take your Thursday pass. I give every student a Thursday pass. They get one, right, where if you just don't know, you can pass. Or if you give an incorrect answer, I'll say, good, wrong guess, you know, and then I look to another student for the answer. So I try to make sure that a student, regardless of what they answer, that they never feel like I'm dismissing their voice or that it doesn't matter, because it does matter. And they wouldn't be sitting in that seat if it didn't matter. That's one of the other things that I really like about the difference between K through 12 and college is that students, in many ways, there could be outside pressure, et cetera, but in many ways they're electing to be in that seat, right? It's mandated that students have to go K through 12, or at least until you're 16. Whereas in college, they want to be there for whatever reason. So me knowing that you want to be there, I want to take what you say very seriously. And even if it's incorrect, I'll let you know it's incorrect, but I'll make sure you don't feel as if I think that your response is stupid or that your voice doesn't matter. I try to have them carry this education outside of the classroom, this confidence outside of the classroom, and not this, oh, I'm stupid, I barely learned anything in this class. I want them to think, I learned a lot, I still have a lot more to go, but I'm excited to engage in that process. Good evening, everyone, and to the Chancellor, thank you for hosting this amazing dinner. It's been great. I will keep it brief, I promise. So first and foremost, I'd like to thank my family, in particular my mom, my sister, my brother, and my grandparents, all of whom have shown me endless love and support. I'd also like to thank and give a big shout out to a few professors who have played a huge role in both my intellectual and pedagogical development. Professor Vilma Ortiz, who's here at UCLA, who should seriously win a teaching award every year for the amazing work that she does and her enormous dedication to her graduate students and undergrads. Also, Professor Jeff Prager, who was one of the first professors I ever TA'd for. His skillful teaching practices I was able to observe and learn so much from. And then Professors Andrea Clay and Chris Bettinger, who are at San Francisco State, but they are two of the best professors I've ever had, and it was a pleasure sitting in their class. And then lastly, to my friends, like Rocio, who accompanied me tonight, and I thank you so much. I want to say thank you for the love and encouragement, pushing me to think more critically about my pedagogical philosophy, and also pushing me to envision and develop teaching practices that aim to include all of my students into the classroom conversation. So for all of you, I thank you so much. You don't know how much that you support me and keep me going and keep me sane. So I thank you, I love you, and thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. Our next awardee is Matthew Fontana. He's a teaching assistant in the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry. And for Matthew, it's clear that a teaching career is a real calling for Matt. It's not just a job. He is an attentive and a passionate teacher who strives to teach students that science is everywhere around them, and that chemistry is a subject, in the end, about people interacting with their world. So Matthew Fontana.
One strategy I use to sort of encourage participation from multiple students is a technique I learned from when I took physics as an undergraduate, which is what I like to call the three-finger method. And usually, let's say you're talking about what carbon atom, has, however many protons on it, And if you're talking about carbon 1, you ask the students to put one finger up. If you think it's carbon 2, you ask them to put 2 fingers up. And then if they don't know, it's 3 fingers. And then, students might feel embarrassed to put the 3 fingers up, but, I always try to lower that stress by saying, when I was an undergraduate, our physics club had a t-shirt where it said every day is a 3-finger day. And the students will usually laugh at that. And thankfully, I get plenty of 3 fingers when I ask those questions. And so that way I can then survey the class. And then even if they're too shy as a student to then say, I don't know, or maybe give a wrong answer, I can at least see what the students are thinking. I'm really excited that I get to, have the opportunity to then just talk about a subject I'm really passionate and excited about, and then to then not only see the students get excited about it too, but also to then see it then click for them like, oh, this is something that I understand, and then also additionally to see them go from the transition of like, oh, this is something that's like I feared and was confusing to me, and then now it's something I understand and I feel like something I can do successfully well. And so for all those reasons, that's why I really enjoy teaching. I'd like to thank everyone for coming out tonight, and I've met and talked with a lot of great people today, and I look forward to talking with more individuals as we move on with the evening. And I'd like to thank the Chancellor and his wife for hosting this event at their residence. I'd like to thank all the Office of Instructional Development and all the people who helped put on this spectacular event, and I'm really appreciative and thankful to all of you with that. I'd first like to say, I'm so thankful and honored to receive the UCLA Distinguished Teaching Award. I'm truly humbled to receive this, and I am very, grateful for that. And I'd like to thank lots of people, of course. And so I'd first like to thank the Division of Physical Sciences and Miguel Garcia Garibay, for all support with fostering a science division that puts a strong emphasis on teaching. I'd like to thank the chemistry department and Professor Catherine Clark for really having a chemistry department that really supports teaching and provides graduate students all the opportunities to really do what they do and excel at it. And I'd like to thank the Chemistry Instructional Faculty Division, specifically Dr. Pang and Dr. Russell for being my teaching mentors. Me being a first-year graduate student and not knowing all the best ways to manage teaching, but them being open and accepting of me going to their office like, oh, I'm confused on how to do such and such. What do you recommend is the best way? And through them being open has served as a model for me to be open with my students and really just encourage lots of questions so that the best learning can occur. I'd also like to thank, of course, the UCLA Office of Instructional Development. I'd like to thank Drs. Kamiko Haas and Chris Mott for all of their inspiration, their teaching advice, and sage skills. And I've definitely taken a lot of their advice and implemented it in my classrooms. And the key theme is just working with lots of people to get lots of great advice is truly helpful for me. And I'm very thankful for all the great role models. And last, or actually not last, but second to last, I'd like to thank the UCLA students for, allowing me to dedicate my teaching skills in such a wonderful, welcoming, supportive environment. And it's, without the students, I don't have the opportunity to teach and really enjoy the aspect of really helping everyone learn. And I'm really thankful to them for being so supportive of me as I've grown as a teacher. And I'm really honored to have the opportunity to, share what I've learned from my great teachers with them. And then, of course, last but not least, I'd love to thank my loving and supportive parents. Thank you for coming down today. And, I'm thankful for everything that you've done for me every step of the way.
Congratulations, Matthew. Gabrielle Johnson is a teaching assistant in philosophy. She inspires students to see challenges of the material as an opportunity for intellectual growth and for collaborative exploration. Her teaching methods level the playing field among students from disparate backgrounds, and she illuminates topics relevant to their personal and social lives in the course of her instruction. Gabrielle Johnson.
Every new TA, I know this, having talked to many of them, has this fear that they're going to be lecturing the whole time in section, and so we try to encourage them to let loose on the reins a little bit and let students articulate the ideas on their own. And this, again, can be very scary because by lecturing, you keep control of the material the entire time in the discussion. The professor for whom I was TAing was coming in to observe section, and I was really nervous because I knew this was a thing that many TAs have a tendency of doing, and so I was like, I really cannot be the TA who lectures the whole time when the professor comes in. And so for that class in particular, I was like, okay guys, this is your opportunity to shine. And so I raised the question and I gave them the opportunity to basically discuss it, and I was amazed at their ability to not only home in on the most important aspects of that topic, but to engage with each other in a way where everyone got the opportunity to talk. They were listening to each other. They were responding in encouraging and constructive ways. And I think we came out of that discussion understanding the topic way better than we would have had I just gone in and lectured the entire time. I've learned now throughout that experience to trust my students, and as I've been saying this whole time, give them the benefit of the doubt and trust that they're able to engage with each other at that level. And so it was a really edifying experience to see all of that come to fruition. It was like, it's very scary to let go and just see what happens, and the fact that it didn't all come crashing down was wonderful. I have, in my life, learned a lot of things, whether it be growing up in rural Ohio and learning a lot about hard work and respect, to getting my first job at Chipotle and learning to roll the perfect burrito, to coming into academia and learning a bit about intellectual excellence and compassion. And much to my chagrin, I did not come into the world a master of any of those skills. Instead, they were taught to me by strong, inspiring teachers like my mother and my father, my coworkers at Chipotle, or my many mentors and colleagues in philosophy. I wish I had the opportunity to thank each and every one of them. This award is as much a reflection of their success as it is mine. But I only have 60 seconds, so I'll throw out a few quick thank yous. One to my partner, Rima, who has been a continuing source of support. I'd also like to thank the many wonderful faculty members in the philosophy department. I truly do think we have some of the most inspiring and impressive pedagogues at the collegiate level. In particular, I'd like to thank my advisor, Gabe Greenberg, who has been my teaching mentor. I'd also like to thank OID and the Academic Senate for making this award possible and finding me worthy of it. And finally, I'd like to thank the UCLA undergraduate community for continuing to remind me that although I have learned a lot, I still have a lot to learn, and in particular, they have a lot to teach me. Thank you.
It's amazing how we get a glimpse of why they're such good teachers, right? The next, we have three remaining awardees. Sydney Miller is a teaching assistant in the Department of English. She nurtures in her students a willingness to take risks, to venture into complicated literary texts, and to explore abstract theory. She aims at empowering students to realize there is no substitute for the specific contribution that each of them can bring to each discussion. Sydney Miller.
Pale Fire is this insane book. It's essentially constructed of a poem by a fictional poet. His name is John Shade, that Vladimir Nabokov wrote. So you have a full 999-line poem, sort of in the vein of Robert Frost. And then you have 300 pages of annotations from another fictional character whose name is Charles Kinbote, who has just completely misread this entire poem. And it's insane. I was recommended against teaching Pale Fire, and it was a struggle. It was a 4W struggle, but let me tell you, the kids who were into it, of which I would say there were about 75%, they were really, really into it. And the Kinbote exercise that I did when I had these students inhabit this voice, it was truly the best writing that I had gotten out of them the whole quarter. And I think that freedom was really liberating for them, right? Because it's like, even though the activity itself is asking them to inhabit this voice of another person, what I'm hoping they will get out of it is that they will kind of find their own voice, right? And express their own voice. And so it really works effectively that way. I don't regret it. I might not do it again for an undergraduate entry-level writing class. I might wait for a different context, but I don't regret it.
Hello. I'm glad that you showed the Pale Fire clip, because it was the text that I kept returning to sort of as I was trying to construct this teaching philosophy. And the title of the book came from, Nabokov stole it himself from Shakespeare, from a play called Timon of Athens. And the line reads, "The moon is an errant thief whose pale fire she snatches from the sun." If that doesn't make that much sense, you probably have a kind of idea of what my students thought going into it, which is why I was recommended against it, probably. That being said, at the risk of not citing my sources, one of the first things that I was told about teaching is that the best teaching is actually stealing from other good teachers. And so I just wanted to take this opportunity to sort of apologize to some of the many, many people who I've stolen from to get me up here with this luminous award. The first of which being, of course, Chris Mott, who I've already plagiarized once tonight. In these brief comments. But also, I'm very, very sorry to the many professors who I've TA'd for, especially Lowell Gallagher and Jonathan Grossman, who are here tonight, who I've studied and attempted to mimic their charisma in the classroom as much as I possibly could. To Taylor Wally, who is my friend and colleague, and she took me under her wing when UCLA forgot to assign me a mentor when I first got here, and I've just been striving to copy her ever since in everything that she does. She's not here because she actually got a tenure track job, so fingers crossed that I can copy her in that as well. Mike Lambert, no one can do what you do, and so I know better than to even try. And I have to say also, actually, no thanks to my family, my first and my most generous supporters and teachers, because they nearly preempted my thievery and graciously and voluntarily gave me everything that I have and that they had to give. So thank you to them. Thanks.
Kendra Nyberg is a teaching assistant in the Department of Bioengineering. She fosters an inclusive classroom that has a positive impact on students' lives and sparks new interests in science specifically. By creating a dynamic learning environment, she finds that students thrive where lab sections become a place of conversation rather than a one-sided demonstration. So Kendra Nyberg.
In the science and food lab classrooms, being able to have the students have hands-on activities using food is really essential, especially because that enables them to really investigate these questions that they may have already thought about while eating those types of foods. One great example that we have in lab is understanding the texture of Jell-O. So what actually makes Jell-O stiff? We teach them that that's proteins, and that the concentration of proteins and the crosslinks that occur in the Jell-O all contribute to this overall stiffness. And then we go one step further by having the students actually conduct a scientific quantitative experiment by actually measuring the stiffness of Jell-O by adding weights and depressing it by a certain amount, and being able to actually extract these fancy terms that physicists use all the time. And I think that's really one really great way that the students can really be slowly introduced to these evidence-based studies that they'll really take forward in graduating and being prepared for higher order thinking.
I, like Gabrielle, grew up in the rural Midwest, and so I have a great appreciation for the powers of Jell-O.
Thank you. So I'm so honored and humbled to be here tonight. Teaching at UCLA has really been one of the best experiences in grad school. I always joke that it definitely rivals my dissertation work. Luckily for me, I had the same mentor both in teaching and in my dissertation work. So thank you, Amy, for being here and supporting me through these past 5 years. I would also like to thank the Academic Senate on Teaching for selecting me for this award. Again, I'm very humbled. Thank you, Jean and Carol Block, for hosting this event. I would also like to thank my parents. I wouldn't be here today without them. My mother taught me discipline. My dad taught me to be a storyteller, and every day during teaching, I try to integrate those together. And I would also like to thank both bioengineering and integrative biology and physiology for co-nominating me for this event, or for this award. It was really special to both get the support from these two great departments. And then lastly, I would like to thank OID and my students for constantly challenging me to be a better teacher. I really appreciate that. So thank you.
I managed to miscount the small number of 2 as 3. So actually, this is our final awardee in the teaching assistants. And so I'd like to now turn over the podium to Complet Professor Kathy Komar, who has served on many committees at UCLA, including chairing the Academic Senate and the Committee on Instructional Improvement Programs. Professor Komar was the previous co-director of OID, and she will be presenting the Distinguished Teaching Awards to non-Senate faculty.
Little did I know we'd all have Jell-O in common, because Kendra's comments also reminded me of my college cafeteria, where we conducted very similar experiments of depressing the Jell-O. But mostly it was to guess how long the Jell-O might have been on the shelf before we picked it up. I'm really thrilled to be able to be here to celebrate something for a change. Given our world situation, it is really a wonderful experience to be able to both be inspired and intimidated by all of the fantastic teachers we have. And one of the things that we all appreciate, and in case you haven't felt this, we really do recognize and appreciate the fact that teaching takes place in lots of different ways on this campus, and lots of different folks engage in it. And a huge part of that effort is done by non-Senate faculty, as well as the TAs. The non-Senate faculty are crucial to our teaching mission. So it's my privilege to introduce to you the 3 winners of the non-Senate faculty awards. The first is Mary Corey from the History Department, who strives to awaken students to the sense of amazement that what they're studying actually happened, and to convey the idea that historical outcomes are not necessarily inevitable. She respects each and every student and makes special efforts to give student athletes, in particular, the skills they need to thrive both in and beyond college. Mary Corey.
There's a rigidity in being an intellectual who thinks, well, you need to know this and you need to know this, and if you don't know this, you must be a moron, you know. But in fact, I'm here to teach, and I have to do that with an open heart. There's not a mask, there's not formality, and there's not a rigid hierarchy at all. And I talk about myself, and I talk about things that have happened to me. Now, I happen to be very fortunate because I'm teaching America since 1960, which is my life. So, and I have a lot of things to say. I mean, I was in demonstrations, I worked in the civil rights movement, I was part of SNCC on the UCLA campus, I was part of SDS, I was against the war, I lived in a commune. I have a colorful history that is attached to events in history. And I tell my stories. But the fact that I'm willing to be myself and expose myself to them, make myself vulnerable to them, they're for me. I mean, they're not all of them. There are people that just can't stand me. They think I'm just horrible, and they talk about these Coryites. Oh, I hate those Coryites who sit in the front row, But I mean, by and large, what it has to do with is a willingness to be who I am and not pretend to know all the answers and not to be that different from them. I thought that was pretty good. This means a lot to me. I'd like to thank you, Chancellor. This is a beautiful event. I've really had a good time. And I have a few people to thank, but mostly I just want to talk about why this means so much to me, in 60 seconds. I want to thank my family, David, who is here with me, who has been with me through thick and thin, and there was a lot of thin and a lot of thick. And I also want to thank my late, great mentor, Joyce Appleby, who taught me the elegance of having a life of the mind. I miss her. I came to UCLA in 1962. I was 19 years old. I was an undergraduate under the sway of a great professor named Donald B. Meyer, who was a brilliant genius and intellectual historian, and I wanted to be him, and I do try. I graduated in 1966, and I came back to UCLA in 1986 after having had a life to get a graduate degree. And in 1996, when I got my degree, I began teaching here. I have spent most of my adult life on this campus. I have given a lot of my adult life to this campus and to the students. The year I graduated, they finished building Bunch Hall. And they planted these tiny little ferns in the atrium. They were this big. If you go there now, they're 50 feet tall. So I am constantly reminded of my great age and the duration of my time, because luckily I didn't keep growing, And so, really what I want to say is that I've been here a long time. I've left it all on the floor. I thank my students from the bottom of my heart because they're what keeps me here day in and day out. And it means so much to me to get an award from a place that I have given so much to, and that has in turn given me a wonderful life. I really thank you.
I sympathize with being from the 60s. I once announced to my student that I worked on John Kennedy's campaign, and they went, "Oh, you were alive when Kennedy..." I'm afraid so. Our next award winner is Benjamin Lewis from the Linguistics Department, who teaches American Sign Language. He runs interactive classes where students are encouraged not just to learn, but to apply what they've learned dynamically. He immerses students in a voices-off learning environment and supplements the in-class experience with free tutoring for students to play with the language in a more casual and friendly space. Benjamin Lewis.
Remember previously I mentioned my ASL class is a visual language. It's not focused on speech. And so when students come into the class, they expect us to have a lot of speaking in the class. The first day of class, I introduced the concept of a voices off environment. And the purpose for that is because ASL is a visual language. So if you use your voice, you won't really improve. It won't push their level. They won't advance. They'll depend on their speech and their English. And so those in the deaf community don't use our voices. We use sign language. And so the students are generally surprised by this. And later on, they do have a better attitude because in the classroom, we have a full immersive experience. That means this is a different experience than they're used to. And when they meet deaf people in real life, they'll know what to do. They won't deviate to speaking with deaf people. So this is just full equal access within the classroom. And it also comes down to respect. When a deaf person is in the classroom, if a student speaks, that limits the communication access for the deaf person. They won't know what's going on, especially me as a deaf person. I encourage students to be sensitive in regards to accessibility and encourage them to sign. And if they're still struggling, I allow them to write on a piece of paper. They know how to adjust and not just depend on their speech.
This is such a big honor to be with you this evening. I really want to thank very much the Linguistics Department for your complete support in nominating me for this award. What I wanted to share with you is something that's really important to me. A long time ago, people spent a lot of time oppressing people of color, thinking that segregation was the ideology to support. But there were strong people that opposed that idea and changed. Slowly, that over many, many years changed the world. And now we live in a better world for people of color, and we're not completed in that journey. The same is true for people who are members of the LGBT community. There was a time in our world where it was completely taboo to identify with that community, and now changes are being made. More members of our society are accepting members of the LGBTQ community. The same is true for deaf people. People who are deaf have always been seen as less than. But we are really fighting against that idea. And here at UCLA, we're willing to allow American Sign Languages to be taught on campus. It is such a really big honor to have the university change that perspective, and I'm so grateful that UCLA offers me that opportunity to come and teach the students here American Sign Language. I know that UCLA focuses heavily on the medical field. They're well known for that, this idea of fixing people, but they also allow this new lens on campus to consider this new paradigm for deaf people, so I'm so grateful to be a part of this community here at UCLA, and this is such a special honor, and I thank you for it.
It's a hard act to follow. Our final non-Senate faculty awardee is actually from the medical end of campus, Associate Clinical Professor Jason Napolitano, who assures me, no relation, is consistently praised and sought after for his teaching style and his effectiveness. His lectures are well organized, thoughtful, and relevant, and inspiring. He's a positive and accessible role model who prepares students for the real-world practice of medicine. Jason Napolitano.
We definitely learn from our students' feedback. Even as an experienced clinician, you know, there's a lot on your mind, there's a lot you're processing, and you go in a room and maybe you've seen it so many times that it just doesn't, it's okay, you know, it's a sad moment, but I have to give someone else a diagnosis of cancer, and you know, you've done it a lot of times, and you sit down, you go through the right motions, and it may not hit you as much until you look over and you see maybe a third-year student that hasn't seen that before, and you see how much they're affected by it, and I think that sort of brings you back to reality for a moment, to the importance of the situation. So I think, you know, having a complete team that has you know, students on it, it makes for better patient care, and it makes for us staying more human and doing the right thing for our patients. And I've entered in a stage in my career where people that I've taught in medical school are now attendings, and they're teaching me. So I just went to a course that was led by someone who I precepted when he was a second-year medical student. He put on a whole 1-week course, and I learned all sorts of things from his teaching, and that's sort of a nice circle of academia where people, rise up through the system, learn a few things from you, learn even more, and become much smarter than you, and then teach you back again. So that's part of the fun of being here at UCLA. Thank you very much for this honor, and thank you to Chancellor and Mrs. Block for hosting this beautiful event tonight. It's a huge honor to be amongst real professors. I first want to give out some thank yous. First and foremost, I want to thank my family. I want to thank my wife, Erin, who's sitting in the audience, and my children, Luca and Milo, at home. They share me with 180 medical students for several months out of the year. So thank you for putting up with that guy just sitting at the kitchen table typing on his computer for a few months in a row. Secondly, I'd like to thank some of my mentors and some of the leadership that we have over on the Department of Medicine side. Alan Fogelman has been very supportive for the last 15 years since I set foot on campus. On the medical school side, I want to thank Dr. Mazziota, Dr. Martin, and then our Vice Dean for Education, Dr. Clarence Braddock, who's here today, and he's our fearless leader on the medical education front, and thank you for all that support that you've given. And then finally, I just wanted to acknowledge what a great opportunity it is to be on this campus. I kind of say that I live on both sides of Westwood Boulevard. On one side is Ronald Reagan Medical Center, where I admit patients and provide medical care in the hospital. And then on the other side of Westwood is the medical campus. And, one of my great passions has become, what goes into making a good doctor. And I get to go to both sides of the street, see the patient care, figure out what we need to bring back to the classroom to develop the next generation to provide even better and more compassionate care for us and our family members. And it's really an honor to be able to work in such a system. So thank you very much.
This does remind us of the range of kinds of teaching that take place on campus. So thank you to this entire group of awardees for the inspiration. And I'd now like to turn this program over to Professor Albert Corey from the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry, who will present the Distinguished Teaching Awards to the Senate faculty. Al Corey has also been on many committees that have to do with teaching and other aspects of the academic senate. Al.
Thank you, and good evening. So I have had the privilege of chairing the Academic Senate Committee on Teaching for the last 2 years, and so this is the second year in a row that I've had the honor of conferring these awards to the Academic Senate Distinguished Teaching Awardees. The Committee on Teaching has the responsibility for choosing the Distinguished Teaching Award recipients from among the Senate faculty, non-Senate faculty, and TAs nominated by their departments. This year, choosing the awardees was especially difficult for us because we had an exceptionally large number of nominees in all 3 categories, easily the largest number in the 3 years that I've served on the committee. So the committee members spent countless hours reviewing nomination packages and then meeting with one another to select the winners. Could the members of the committee who are present please stand so that we can acknowledge our hard work? I think it's obvious that we did a great job. Okay. All this year's nominees are inspiring teachers with exceptional dedication to their students. That's all the nominees, not just the ones that won the awards. And so the awardees really are the cream of the crop. One thing that distinguishes many of this year's winners is their dedication not only to excellence in teaching, to excellence in their own teaching, but also to making their colleagues better teachers. That's something I don't think we've heard much about so far tonight, but that was something that was really important to the committee. I'm sure they'll all agree. I'd like to introduce now the 6 Senate Faculty Distinguished Teaching Awardees. And so our first Senate Faculty Distinguished Teaching Awardee is Don Booth, Professor of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology. Professor Booth, who's being honored with the Ebby Award for the Art of Teaching, is committed to providing his students with opportunities for active engagement. He doesn't believe in dry labbing it and is one of the few instructors who still run full field collecting trips, thereby providing opportunities rarely found at institutions outside of UCLA. I'll just also mention that I was talking with Professor Booth before dinner, and he reminded me that he has had a parasite named after him. So I don't know how many of us can say that. So, Don Booth.
We're at an urban university, an urban campus. A lot of people really have not gotten out enough to be able to appreciate the outdoors. And when they're given that opportunity in the class, they'll jump at it. For my ichthyology class, I took them halfway up the coast of San Francisco to San Simeon for a weekend camp out and then catching fishes in the tide pools up there. Almost all of the students in those classes had never camped out in their life. That was their first experience. And that was new, they liked it. When I taught in the marine biology quarter at Catalina, that I found in that class that no one in the class had ever gone fishing. So I said, fishing is a legitimate collecting technique. What you're going to do in this class is at least for one day, you're going to go out and go fishing. But we're getting away from any physical element in teaching, that it's watching a screen. It's watching a screen that is a projection of the lecture itself, not even a live lecture. We even have on video the virtual field trip, so you can experience it without ever going outside the classroom. To take students on field trips allows them to see the organisms that they're studying alive and in their habitat, actually moving around and doing things that they can't get that from just looking at images on a screen or pictures in a book. That's really what they're looking for.
First, let me thank the Chancellor and everyone who spent months in preparation of this night. When I was nominated by my then department chair, Peter Nonax, I was immediately contacted by staff members whose job it was to take my nomination package and improve it and make it look as good as possible. I was pleasantly surprised that we had such people on our staff. Over the years, I have rarely taught a class with another professor. I've often done it by myself, but I was not teaching alone. I was always assisted by a teaching assistant in every class, major class that I've had. For the most part, those people were excellent. But if you look at my teaching evaluations for my first 20 years at UCLA, it was the norm. I wasn't considered for any awards during that time, nor did I deserve them. But things changed around 2000. Certain student attitudes changed about that period of time, but I was blessed by back-to-back-to-back teaching assistants, Julie Coleman-Passarelli, Brian Cott, and Marissa Tellez, who were absolutely outstanding. They TA'd all my classes, and whenever they did, their evaluations were sky high, and my evaluations always improved. All three of them received teaching awards. All three of them earned their PhDs here. All three of them are now involved in careers that have a teaching component to them. I know it was them because now that they're gone, my teaching evaluations have returned to the norm. Fortunately, the committee didn't notice that. Thank you.
I'll certainly echo that my teaching evaluation scores correlate with the teaching So the next award goes to Ingrid Egley, Professor of Law. Professor Egley's contributions are succinctly described by a law school colleague, who shall remain nameless, who said that, quote, Ingrid doesn't just think outside the teaching box, she has completely redefined the box. In saying this, the colleague is referring to Professor Egley's leadership in the development of experiential law school courses, such as her criminal defense clinic, which provide her students with opportunities to work in the community. She wants to do more than just convey legal theory. She wants to help her students become skilled professionals.
In the law school, we use the Socratic method, which is a method of calling on students and asking them questions to sort of draw out important lessons with the material. I do use the Socratic method, but I do so in a way in which I encourage everyone to participate. At the same time, I realize that there's some students that really have a hard time participating. This is something that's particularly challenging for them and can be very intimidating. If you have a large classroom of 100 students, to have to be called on in front of all of your classmates can be very intimidating. But at the same time, the law is a field that really puts a premium on oral communication. Many students want to become litigators. They want to make presentations in court. And even if they're not interested in litigation, they will be going on to working with clients, presenting their theory of a particular case, advising that client on the law in a whole variety of settings. So it's important to start to be comfortable with the law and with answering questions in a classroom, just like you would have when a client comes to you and asks you a question about the law. So I try to not shy away from some of our traditional methods and using the Socratic method of teaching, but I really strive for sort of a softer style that I think is more effective with a greater range of students.
Well, I want to start out by thanking Chancellor Block as well as the Academic Senate for this really very meaningful award. This award is particularly meaningful to me because I really grew up around teaching. My parents are both educators and deeply valued teaching and education in growing up and really instilled in me wanting to actually become a teacher. I'm truly honored to be part of a university that cares so much about teaching and to have law school colleagues that value it so much. I want to also recognize my colleagues at the law school and Dean Jennifer Mnookin, as well as Tracy Parr and Samantha Liu of our Dean's office, who nominated me for this award and supported and shepherded me through the process. I also want to recognize that I would not be here tonight without the support of my family. In particular, I want to thank my husband, Scott Cummings, for all of his support throughout my career. And finally, I'm so grateful to my students. They inspire me each and every day when I have the great privilege to teach them in the classroom. Thank you.
Our next Senate faculty awardee is Classics Professor Alex Purvis. Professor Purvis is receiving this year's award for distinction in graduate teaching, but her undergraduate and graduate teaching are equally distinguished. She is a scholar in the epic poetry of Homer, and her reputation as a skilled and caring graduate mentor is such that many students apply to the UCLA Classics Department graduate program just so they can study Homer under her guidance. It was clear to the committee that Professor Purvis is someone who thinks hard about how to make connections to her students as individuals.
I try for each class that I'm teaching, as I'm going along, I try to find some kind of signature little thing that we will do together as a class, both as a way of breaking up the kind of period, the time period of the class, so that there is a kind of something unique to our class that we will do together, but also as a way of students kind of bonding around the idea of what our class is and what makes our class special in some way. And then in my graduate seminars, we always end with this, what I call the 30-second rant, borrowing from KCRW's left, right, and center. So everybody at the end of class will go around the room and everybody will say something very quickly about what they had been thinking of at some point during the seminar. And we just finish with that. And I think the students really like it. They have a kind of sense of identity and ownership from the class. I mean, I think it's more important that graduate students and undergraduate students kind of push themselves at this point while they're in school and they have that chance, even if it's not wholly successful, than just staying within the boundaries. And I really encourage students, if they have their own ideas for what they want to do, I'll usually allow them to do it, because I just feel that whatever makes the material come to life for them and talk to them, it's worth pursuing it in some way.
Thank you. I'm so humbled to share the stage with the other awardees. It's really very moving to be here, so thank you. I'm thrilled to win this award. I'm thrilled to teach at a public university. I'm thrilled to teach within the humanities. One of my goals as a classicist is to teach the students to ask critical and ethical questions, to develop reading practices that will stay with them for their lives. So I want to quickly thank two supporters who are with me tonight. My husband, Lionel Popkin, who has always been there, standing by my side and listened to me. Thank you for your encouragement. And I want to thank my chair, Catherine Morgan, also a close friend, who has been a great supporter and has taught me so much about teaching as well as many other things. And of course, I want to thank most of all the sine qua non of why I got this award, my students, both graduate and undergraduate, from whom I have learned so much. They've made me a kinder and a braver teacher, and the interactions I've had in the classroom have shaped who I am, both as a classicist and as a person. So thank you very much for this award. It means a lot.
Alvaro Sagasti, professor of molecular cell and developmental biology, is receiving this year's award for distinction in undergraduate mentoring. Professor Sagasti creates an active learning environment in his lab where students at all levels, including graduate students, undergraduates, and postdocs, work collaboratively with one another. By believing in their abilities, Professor Sagasti builds confidence in his students and unlocks their passion for science. One of his students related very passionately about how he couldn't believe that Professor Sagasti would let him touch that, priceless microscope, at the risk of, destroying it, and that was just so meaningful to him in terms of, building his confidence. Professor Sagasti's outreach activities and commitment to diversity are also exceptional. One of his former students said the following: Alvaro's mentorship style is welcoming to students from diverse backgrounds. He actively encourages open communication and speaks up in defense of those who may feel marginalized. Alvaro.
I think the students we have at UCLA are really smart, and they deserve the respect of, being given challenging assignments. And something that could really change the way they think about a problem. Well, I tell students from the beginning that it's going to be a difficult class, right? And, and unfortunately, students come with different preparations. So it's easier for some than for others, right? But I like to remind them that the value of a course isn't in getting an A, right? It's in what you learned. So if somebody came in with already a lot of background in this and they got an A, that's an achievement that they deserve credit for. But if somebody really struggled and made a breakthrough and only got a B, that class was still more valuable for them. I think of some people think of a science course being challenged is that the professor is using it as a weeder, like they're trying to discourage people, and that's the opposite of what I'm trying to do. I think you can have something that's difficult and also fun. And in fact, it's more fun because it was difficult and because you figured it out, right? So I don't want to leave anyone behind. The goal isn't, to filter out the weak students, whatever. It's I think all the students have the potential to be strong students. So thank you. I'm really honored and humbled. So thank you to everybody who selected me for this and everybody who organized this nice evening. And a lot of credit should go to my great TAs and my undergraduate, graduate students and postdocs who have been amazing to work with. And I want to also particularly acknowledge my department. So when you train to be a scientist, there's very little preparation to close to none for being a teacher. And when you start being a scientist, there's so much pressure to get your lab going and publish and get grants that it's easy to try to make teaching something secondary, or if not, even consider it a nuisance. And I think that before I started here, I fully expected teaching to play that role in my career. But when I came to UCLA, I was lucky to come to the MCDB department, where in particular our chair, Utpal Banerjee, really puts an emphasis on teaching, and it doesn't just value competent teaching, but also is an innovator who has really put experimental research at the center of our curriculum, and not just in our department. He started this amazing biomedical minor, and I think it's filtered out through a lot of the sciences. So I want to thank him and two of our former vice chairs, Luis Ciruela-Rispe and Amanda Clark, who nominated me for this award. So thank you.
Our next Senate faculty awardee is sociology professor Abigail Segee. Abigail has been exceptionally active in curricular development, for example, creating a fascinating GE cluster entitled Sex from Biology to Gendered Society. Her teaching evaluations are littered with effusive praise, such as the following. Quote, Segee was absolutely amazing. Her lectures really challenged the way I looked at the world, and she kept everyone in class thinking about things in new ways. Her approach was very personal, and that I loved, unquote. One of Professor Segee's senior colleagues describes her lectures as simply spectacular.
I really respect and admire my students, and I don't come to them from a position of superiority. I think I have things to learn from them, and I am interested in learning from them. I think our students can tell us a lot, for instance, about this generation. And as a sociologist, I study the social world. And I'm very interested in how our attitudes about gender, for instance, and gender and sexuality and race are changing right now in this generation. And so my students often serve as what sociologists call key informants for me. They can give me insight that I don't have as a Generation Xer, as someone who's older than they are. I really try both while I'm lecturing and in office hours, and every moment I have to convey to each student, whether it's when they ask a question during lecture or afterwards, that I value them as a human being, as a person, that I'm interested in them, that I think that their perspective has value and that they have value. And I can say that in the 15 years that I've been teaching at UCLA, I've seen students go on to do things, important things, and to play a role in shaping the world that we live in. And so it's very concrete to me that these are the future leaders of our society, that they will play an important role, and that I am in this privileged position as one of their professors to help shape them for good. So I would like to thank the committee for this great honor. I am deeply honored and humbled by this award. I would also like to acknowledge the cluster class, G Cluster 72, that has been mentioned a couple times this evening. I was very proud to be one of the 4 faculty to develop this very innovative class, but I did it with my colleagues Art Arnold in physiological sciences, Eric Villain in medicine and human genetics, and Marty Hazelton in psychology and communications. And it really was a collective effort, and the teaching benefited from not only their joint participation, but also the wonderful TAs that we had over the years, as all of my teaching has. I'd also like to acknowledge the staff and my colleagues in sociology. In particular, I would like to thank Vice Chair Ed Walker and former Chair and current Dean Darnell Hunt for having the faith in me to nominate me not once for this award, but twice, and for all of the hard work that went into those nominations. It means a lot to me. I'd also like to acknowledge my current chair and dear friend and cherished colleague, Megan Sweeney, a former recipient of this award from whom I've learned so much about teaching and so many other things. My biggest fan and supporter is my husband, Dotan, whose tireless work running our household is what makes it possible for me to throw myself into my research and teaching, and I'm very grateful for that. Finally, I'd like to acknowledge my late father, Charles W. Smith, who was a pioneering economic sociologist, passionate teacher, and dedicated mentor, and who was really an example for me. And I was very pleased to have been able to give him the great news of this award before he passed on May 31st. Thank you.
Okay, our final awardee this evening is Eric Sung, Professor of Clinical Dentistry. Eric has developed a program that seeks to train students to provide dental care for physically, developmentally, and mentally challenged patients, a group that has been largely ignored by most dentists and dental schools. The curriculum and teaching methods that he has devised in this area have been adopted worldwide. Professor Sung is unable to be here with us today, so accepting the award on his behalf is Dr. Benjamin Wu, Chair of the Division of Advanced Prosthodontics in the School of Dentistry.
One of the things I've done is bring students and residents to different parts of the world to provide care for the underserved population. Even in Southern California, we have a lot of people with these disabilities that can't be treated. They're unable to cooperate. So when we go to other parts of the world, there are many people with severe dental issues that hasn't been treated because no one can treat them. And so when we show up in these places, and some are very, very much in the outskirts, not necessarily of a town, but it may be a town that's hours away from anywhere, I think it's very eye-opening to bring my colleagues, residents, students to these sites to see what an impact that they can make. And the bigger picture is, look what your background has allowed you to do. What a difference you can potentially make as a dentist, as a healthcare provider, based on your training. So, part of this whole thing is, again, imparting knowledge and bring them to that next level so that they discover it and then they can pursue it themselves. Again, teaching them or having them do one additional filling or one additional crown or one additional, that's minor when it comes to a lifetime of experience. But if you teach them the process, the confidence, they can really grow, and it can apply to many more things in life than just a tooth.
Maybe we should just thank Chancellor and Mrs. Block one last time for hosting this wonderful event. And now I'd like to invite Professor Adrian Levine back up to the podium for some closing remarks.
Congratulations once again to all the winners. We leave tonight newly inspired by our awardees and with great appreciation for all that they do to make our university truly great. Thank you all for attending this evening's event, and good night.